Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Eat Spanish online congress. We are talking about sherry, and to do so, I have two real legends in the wine industry, two people that know very well the sherries. Hello, Scott. Hello, Raul.
Good day.
Hola, todos.
How are you guys
Hola.
going?
Muy bien, ¿y tú?
Very good, very good. Scott and I are right now in Melbourne, Victoria. So it's 8 o'clock for us. Very good time to drink sherry. And Raul is in Spain at the moment, which is 10 a.m. in the morning, which is also a very good time to drink sherry.
Ese es el perfecto bebé para desayuno, ¿sí?
Right. Well, Scott,
Estoy de acuerdo.
stop showing off with your Spanish and stop showing off with the map of Andalusia that you have in the background. For those who don't know Scott, well, everyone knows Scott in the wine industry in Australia, but he's the importer of the Spanish Acquisition, which is the Spanish wine imported that brings the best sherry in the country, and many more things. But I'm gonna let yourself introduce yourself, Scott. Who are you?
Well, I'm a guy who was meant to be a politics professor at a uni, and I was just so in love with food and booze and the hospitality industry that I couldn't quite commit to academia, and I accidentally went to Spain to discover looking for Spanish wine in 2000 because there was literally nothing here that was interesting, and it was such an important country and recovering from the Civil War and all of that sort of thing. It seemed like it might be its time, and it simply took over my life. So I've been literally just all about Spain and Spanish wine for 20-something years now.
So did one of the first spot that called your attention in Spain was it sherry, or when did you came across sherry?
Well, sherry was the beginning of the story. I was on a cold winter's night in Adelaide in the middle of 1998, which was a very cold winter. A friend of mine and I were drinking maybe a not particularly great sherry, but it was what was available in Australia at the time. And we were talking about the Olympics, and we went, man, there's got to be all of these half-empty planes going back to Europe after everybody's been dropped off in Sydney for the September 2000 Olympics. Maybe we can go to Europe really cheap. At the time we were both, PhD uni students, and spending all of our money on booze, and didn't really have a lot of money left over for recreational international first-class airfares and things. And so we shook hands on it and went, where are we going to go? And we went, well, we're drinking Fino, and there's certainly a lot to learn about Spain, so why don't we go and check out Spanish wine? And 2 years later, at full price fare, there turned out to be no discount cheapies going back to Europe. And when the Sydney Olympics were on in September 2000, we jumped on a plane, and I flew into Barcelona, and my mate Peter flew in the day after. So I met him at the airport with a cold stubby of Fino, and I made the classical mistake. We're going to be drinking Manzanilla pretty shortly. That's Raul holding it up there. I knew the story, but I didn't quite believe it. So flew into Barcelona on the first day, and the first thing I did was go to a bar and sit down and say, I didn't have any Spanish, so I didn't even say, quiero una manzanilla or whatever. I'd like a manzanilla, please. And 5 minutes later, I was sitting in front of a nice hot cup of chamomile tea that was beautifully made, but not really what I was looking for.
Classic. Yeah, because manzanilla is also a tea, which is a chamomile tea in Spain, and it's also a type of olive. So they could have give you olive at least. No, just a tea. Cool, nice. Well, Scott, you mentioned to me that the other day that you're writing something, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I thought when the COVID closure happened exactly a year ago this week, that I was going to be, sort of effectively on the beach for a few months with with nothing much to do. And I've been writing a lot about Marco de Jerez, the region that we're talking about tonight. And so I got in touch with a publisher and went, I'm going to have a book for you in 3 months on the end of sherry and the ongoing importance of El Marco. And so far, I haven't written enough. We've been so busy during COVID, one way or another, that it didn't quite happen. But there's a theoretical folder over there on the side of my desk has the book that tells the story about the revolution that's going on in Marco de Jerez right now. And it's I'm sure the most interesting place in white wine on the wine planet, which I'm sure Raoul will address a great deal more when as the evening unfolds.
It is so fascinating to see, like people so passionate in the other side of the world, writing about like the revolution of sherry. This is it's crazy, and we will talk about a bit further about the history and the repercussion of sherry in the not only in the wine world but in the world. But we're gonna go with Raul. Raul Moreno Yagüe. He's another common face in the hospitality industry in Melbourne. He's a sommelier. He's a winemaker. He's an all-time legend. But yeah, Raul, who are you?
Oh, well, not much to say. My background, I started as a cook. I studied cooking in the catering school in Seville, Taberna de la Lavardero. And then I left Spain pretty early, so I was 18, and I went to do an internship in the UK, in London, and working for Marco Pierre White. I ended up getting a position as an apprentice sommelier because my English was terrible, and I wasn't going to develop my English working in a French kitchen. And so been around working in restaurants in Europe, in the States for a few years, and then I landed in Melbourne, and I work in different establishments. And when I was 30 years old, I'm 40 now, 29 actually, I just kind of got a bit tired of working in restaurants, and I was an Australian citizen by the time, which I feel as Australian as a Spanish am. And I decided to go to uni. I first never went to university, never finished high school, and then I studied viticulture, and then I enjoyed it, and then I started a degree in wine science and enjoyed it, and then I studied enology, and I went through different universities in Australia, and then I did masters in viticulture and enology in New South Wales at CSU. And I started traveling, working a bit here and there, spending a fair bit of time in South Africa, working in Burgundy, And now, well, COVID had a bit to do with it and other things. I took my family and I relocated to Spain, and I got a little winemaking project, and that's what I do. I'm gonna miss Melbourne. I'm gonna miss Australia, but I'm planning to be coming back every time I get a chance, hopefully from 2022. Quite hard to get back now to Australia. And I have to say, I came across Scott in 2004. And the only thing I have to say is Australia knows Spanish wines because of Scott. He did an amazing work introducing, and not only introducing good product and exciting wines, it's education. Scott has been holding master classes year after year about the Spanish wines and Portuguese wines with a very strong focus on the Iberian Peninsula. And the most important thing for a revolution is to transmit the knowledge. And I think the work that Scott has done to to explain what the Spanish ones are and put them into context in the 21st century. It's amazing. And we should be more people like Scott in other countries and other emerging markets of Spanish wines, doing the same thing, maybe in Singapore, doing the maybe same thing in South America. But I think we're very lucky to have Spanish ambassadors like Scott doing this kind of work.
I agree. And I actually had planned to introduce myself before you guys, but I forgot.
What's wrong with you, man?
It's just gonna be hard to talk about myself after your presentation. But yeah, it's the lucky moment that we're having at the moment to be with these two industry legends. Well, for those that don't know me, my name is Juan Jurado Gomez. I am from Spain, from Seville, from the same city as Raul. And as well, I left home pretty early. I started working in Barcelona. Then I moved to London. That was when I wanted to start studying a bit of the sommelier education. And that's when I realized the impact of sherry in the world. For me, sherry was something that, you know, my grandma will drink, my auntie will drink. They will bring wines to the dinners, and we'll just open it. And the local wines, nothing too important for us. But then when you go into restaurants, fine dining restaurants in London, and you see how important they take and how serious they take sherry in their pairings, in the daily wine list by the glass, it's when I realized that sherry was something more than wine. Then I moved to Australia in 2013, and yeah, since the beginning, I started working with wine from Scott without knowing that it was from Scott, you know. And then when I had the chance to be head sommelier in a restaurant, then I started to buy wine from him. And I agree with you. I think that Scott is a very, very big fish in terms of Spanish wine in Australia. And yeah, I have been here for 7 years, planning to move to Spain home very soon. I'm going to study viticulture, and yeah, this is me, and a member of Eat Spanish, which I remind you is a non-profit organization that promote Spanish culture in Australia, especially gastronomic culture. And they asked me to do this video about sherry and talk to these two legends to our online congress. And before I ask you a couple of questions, how about we start drinking some wine, guys?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so what are we drinking first?
Manzanilla, Scott?
Sí, La Goya.
Alrighty. So this is what we're drinking at the moment. This is a label that if you guys know sherry, you definitely know. If you guys don't know sherry, you definitely know it as well. It's classic in Australia, and that's thanks to Scott. While we tasting it, and while we getting the spirit of sherry inside us, I wanted to ask you guys what sherry means to you. You guys have traveled the area. You guys know the people, obviously the wines. What is sherry for you guys?
Scott, please.
For me, most days of my life, it is, without gilding the lily, pretty much everything. I have a throwaway line, even when I'm talking about the revolutionary new things that are happening in El Marco, from people that will talk about later on tonight. The first thing I say is, don't get me wrong, I'm not denigrating sherry as is. I drink Lagoya every day of my life, and that isn't going to change. And it's more or less true. It's just, I think it fits the, I drink it when I'm happy, I drink it when I'm sad, etc., etc. That is a very famous quote about champagne. For me, Fino fixes everything. If you're thirsty, if you want a breakfast drink, if you're stressed, if you're nervous or anxious, if you've got a bunch of almecas and prawns and really beautiful little sea beasties that you just want to meet something up with, if you want something that does everything imaginable in your emotional life spectrum. When I play golf, I tip a little bit of Lagoya out of the top of a stubby, chuck 2 bottles in the freezer so it's a slushy when I leave, and my mate and I have a very, very cold stubby of Lagoya that we can sip on when the golf gets a little bit too tough. It is just...
You use it for everything, eh?
See, Fino fixes everything, and if Lagoya is the best regular Fino in the market, it should be the one that you buy for every day of your life and every possible circumstance.
That's cool. That's cool. For me, sherry, it's as I said before, for me it's part of my life. Like, I grew up probably one of the first wines that I drank. I remember having this dinner with my family, and my granddad used to drink sweet and dry sherry, and I remember him like sneaking this glass, like when everyone, Spanish family, wow, everyone just like shouting at each other, and he was like making the most of that confusion moment to sneak a little glass to me, and he was like, drink it. Like just like sipping, I was like, things are a bit different in Spain, and back in the days even more different. But yeah, maybe I was like 8 years old, 10 years old, I don't remember. So one of the first wines that I tried, definitely, and for me, sherry always has been something more, something that is on the table, something like the bread or the olive oil, or just another ingredient that complete the beautiful meal. Nowadays, sherry is, as a sommelier, it's what saves my life. Every difficult pairing that you have, every type of umami food. Like in Australia, we work a lot with Asian flavors that are, wow, what are we gonna pair with this? Sherry always works. If it's not Palomino Fino, if it's like something sweet as well with contrast flavors, with like similar flavor profiles. It works with everything, and also, yeah, as you said, just having a good time with friends, something that frees your spirit. So for me, sherry is a very, very important part of my life at the moment. Well, what's sherry for you, Raul?
Well, obviously, I had to admit that even though I've been working on the wine industry for the last 22 years, if I have to choose between food and wine, I'm going to choose always food first. But my second love affair is with wine. So why do I say that? I think I want to get to the point that for me, sherry is the most versatile style of wine to pair with food. So in terms of sensorial analysis, we can say that there is 2 types of sherry, to keep it simple. Those pale in color and those dark in color. So Scott has made mention to Fino, which is this style of wine we're drinking, and Manzanilla fits into the category. And the very unique about the Fino, something which is very unique, is obviously this briny, iodine, salty, sea marshy, sea spray character it does have. As Scott pointed, it's amazing to go with seafood, cockles, razor clams, mussels, all sorts of seafood. But the very uniqueness about sherry is that is the best palate cleanser in the world. So Spanish food obviously is very varied, same that Italian and Greek, and we tend to enjoy a lot of different sort of mezzo, a lot of different style of food on the table. We might have some fried croquettes, we have some smoked things, grilled things. So every time you have something too oily, too smoky, too acidic, too sour, it taints your palate. And something that have to do of this style of wines, the process of how you make them, makes this wine very low in a kind of alcohol called glycerol. So without getting into it, the best thing for Fino style sherry is every time you sip it, it cleans your taste buds, and whatever food you put in your mouth, it's absolutely spot on. So yes, so you could have something which in terms of flavor profile doesn't really work with sherry, but because if you have something smoky, something cherry, something oily, it tainted your palate, your taste buds are a bit saturated, a sip of sherry, it cleans it. That sort of sense, I mean, I'm from Seville. If you go to a bar in Seville, you say, give me a glass of white wine. They give you a glass of sherry. Yeah. There is no other choice. I'm not going to give you anything else. So since I was a little kid, my grandfather would give me Fino sherry or Amontillado and Oloroso. So for me, sherry is a celebration. It's an everyday drinking wine. Yes, it's a fortified wine, but I don't see anything with more energy, with more freshness. That
it's a fortified wine. If a fortified wine to 15 ABV, we're talking about many Australian Shiraz are 14.5, 15. Many Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons are 15 degrees. I mean, I think that people is very scared when they hear the word 45. But actually, there are many wines in the market that are up to 15 degrees.
But I think what works is one thing: balance. And maybe Scott can touch on that. So it's the balance that these wines do have, which makes the alcohol not to take over the wine. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, look, I can't remember the last time I even thought about the ABV of nice Finos. They're so fresh. They're floral. They're salty. They've got this, lovely scratch in your mouth from the chalk that they're grown in. Your Raul's point earlier was the most important one. If you and also wisely opening it out to Italian and Greek eating and all that sort of thing. But, if you imagine the Spanish table, you've got, first of all, hablando, talking a whole lot is the most important thing in life in Spain and with Spanish people. And the table tends to be groaning with absolutely everything that you can. So there's raw and cooked, hot and cold, sweet and sour, meat, fish, cheese, veg, pickle, maybe even a little bit of, sort of hotty, spicy stuff here and there. And Fino comes into its own, as Raul was describing. It, in one way, it's quite strong, not from the alcohol, but it's just a very directional wine. And it wants to go from A to Z, from the tip of your tongue down into your throat. And it's broad enough and strong enough that it'll just sort of sweep the carpet as it goes through. So it's pretty and delicate and, floral and salty and light in many ways, but it's got this background sort of sneaky strength. So it suits everything in its prettiness in the early phase of the meal. But it's got enough directional character and stuff to sweep the mat as on the way through. So you never really notice it as being a strong wine.
It's good that you guys are already describing the wines like this, because I guess for many people that be watching right now, they will be like, no, wait, we're not talking about the same thing. Sherry is this dark syrupy dessert wine that my grandma used to drink. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about the diversity of sherry here is to clarify a bit that I think that sherry has been misunderstood for many reasons, but one of the reasons is because people always thought that it was sweet wine, and perhaps in Australia the most common sherry is the sweet style of sherry. And yeah, it's cool that you guys are already talking about it as the most versatile wine, as how we have it with many different style of food. Is if you see what Spanish style food is tapas style, many different flavor profiles, and this one wine to match everything. And it's actually something that I see a lot of people here in Australia when I bring them in a wine pairing, that they don't know what they're drinking. And for the second course, I'm bringing, okay, we're gonna drink sherry now, and people is like, what? I mean, maybe the middle of my savory food. What are you talking about? Yeah, people don't much. A lot of people don't know the many very different styles, from the very dry, the driest in the world, to the very sweet. And it's cool that you guys talking about it. And when you guys were talking about it, you were basically describing the style of sherry that I like the most, which is the manzanilla.
One, if you may. So, no, sorry, Scott, you go ahead. My apologies.
I'll just really quickly would say one of the problems with the word sherry is that it has no gastronomic utility at all. It doesn't tell you what you're drinking. It presupposes that it's fortified, and apart from that, so Raul introduced this before. I'll really quickly say that there's a typology of sherry that divides into three. And tonight we're mainly going to talk about the first type. So there's white and dark sherry, which Raul said, and the dark sherry is divided into sweet styles and fairly strong dry styles. So sweet styles like Pedro Jimenez, PX, amber, strong, dry styles like Amontillado, Palo Cortado, Oloroso. And the wines that we're tasting tonight are neither of those groups. The wines that we're tasting tonight are Palominos and Finos, this mix of basically just pure white wines from sherry country. And I know Raul wants to say more on this topic, so I'll hand over.
Thank you, Scott. No, I just wanted to touch a bit on the topic of Australia. So obviously, when you mentioned before, Juan, that many of your customers might get surprised when you say I'm gonna bring a sherry, we need to put the word sherry into context in Australia.
Absolutely.
So if we go back to the production of wine in Australia, when Australia was first settled, most of the wine production started in Northeast Victoria. So at the beginning, the first wineries, they were built up with aluminium coming from the UK and wood coming from the US, and there was no insulation. They discovered in order to make stable wines, they needed to fortify them. So Australia started producing wine, and the first wines produced in Australia, we are very familiar with, are the sweet fortified wines, the amazing wines produced in Rutherglen, but the sweeter style. But Australia produced a lot of dry sherry too.
As well, yeah.
We gotta say that Palomino was once the most planted white grape variety in Australia. That it
wow.
Changed.
Didn't know that.
It happened in South Africa as well. Palomino, France Durif, because the French grape, it was brought from the Roussillon. The clones of Palomino was the most planted white variety in South Africa. So we need to talk about the evolution of the style of sherry, because up till 1950s or 60s, and Scott can touch on that, Fino style was made slightly different to how it's made. So until back then, the wine was fortified twice. So yes, before being bottled, the Fino styles would be fortified up to 17 degrees. So an extra top up was added at the end. That's something that González Báez have as a signature style. And that's the style of fortification in Australia, which is still the same thing. So if I have to choose, under my opinion, two of the best producers of Fino style sherry in Australia, made with Palomino, one of them might be Pennyweight in Beechworth, another one could be Berks, which is for in New South Wales, which the gentleman who did Berks was the professor of viticulture at Charles Sturt University and brought his Solera from Gonçalves Baez. He used to be head winemaker for Taylor's in Portugal. And because of that, they have access to a winery as well, where we're producing Fino style sherry in Jerez. So my point being, those Fino styles that older people or senior Australians that used to are Finos at 17% alcohol. And in my opinion, I prefer the current style of sherry with one fortification, no second 15, fortification, bottling, because the wines can be a bit bitter. Obviously, they last longer and they have a slightly different structure. And obviously, it's not the same to do it in Australia than to do it, but there is good Australian product. So I think when you give that dry sherry to many Australian people, if there are people who might be 50 years of older, they get a bit concerned because they're used to those 17% style of Fino. When now that nature of younger Finos at 15 and a half, because if you have a really old Fino, by evaporation, it might reach a higher ABV as well, 16 and a half as well. But it's what might scare to some people. And I think for me, it's very important to put that into context because Australia loved sherry back on the days. And it's time for Australia to fall in love with sherry again. And that's why...
Like the rest of the world is doing right now.
Yes. Tokyo is falling in love. Japan is falling in love with sherry again. The UK is falling in love with sherry. Scandinavia is falling in love with sherry. Spain is
falling in love.
Again, of course.
Yeah, because like sherry, I wanted to just mention that sherry is a region. Right? Sherry is a big region that produces many different styles, as we spoke about, and from the very dry to the very sweet. And sherry is a region that has been producing wine for 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So 3,000 years producing wine non-stop. I mean, people have to be falling in love back and forth to keep the industry going. And yeah, I think that a bit of a booming now going on, thanks to many producers. And this is what we are facing nowadays. And I think that Australia is taking the step thanks to people like Scott. Scott, should we try the first wine?
Surely Lagoya time.
What are we? Tell me everything. I want to know everything, please. Lagoya. What's Lagoya? Delgado Zuleta. I can read in here. What is this?
So Delgado Zuleta is a very old house in the village of San Lucar de Barrameda. San Lu is on the confluence of the river Guadalquivir, where it flows out into the Atlantic. This is the town and the river that the Spanish raiding boats used to leave to go, in 1492 and thereafter. All of the Spanish Armada and stuff used to run up and down this river and cash their ill-gotten gains up the river between Sanlúcar and Sevilla. In the background is a marshland that is the most important protectorate for wetland birds in all of Europe. This is the hub of flamenco culture, and it's a really beautiful little seacoast town that has its own native populations of a particular type of prawn that you get in a gorgeous battered wrap in the bars downtown. And it's all about Manzanilla, which is just a local village name for Fino. So when you hear us talking about Fino and Manzanilla in some sort of flip-flop continuum, it's just because Fino is the general classification of these types of wines, which is literally just a white wine aged biologically, which Raul will explain in a minute. at about 15% alcohol in any one of the 9 villages of Marco de Jerez. But Sanlúcar is a town that likes to be a little bit special, so it's insisted in the last 50 years that it has its own appellation name, both for the DO that runs it and for their type of wine. So DO Jerez governs 8 of the 9 villages in El Marco, and all of those villages make Fino. DO Sanlúcar DO Manzanilla Sanlúcar de Barrameda governs this one village, and the Finos there are called Manzanillas. Now, the DO that does this special thing is exactly the same people in the same office in the city of Jerez that govern the other 8 villages, but Sanlúcar's just this noisy little wheel that a while ago decided that really needed to have its own name for everything and be, you know, a little bit special and apart, which is, you know, largely problematic. If we were to get if we were to get in deep into it, and some of the wines we're going to talk about later shine a light on this, Jerez is a really weird place because it's got a couple of DO exclusions that just wouldn't be allowed to fly anywhere else in the world. The PX that's sold here, so the black sweet sherry that we're not going to talk about at all really, nearly all of that's grown in another wine region. In Jerez, they license a thing called Brandy de Jerez, which is supported by the local DO and tolerated by the European Union rules as some sort of weird exclusion. And this is actually brandy made from another grape in another region, Irene from La Mancha, and it spends a few weeks in old sherry casks and somehow gets its own local appellation. So this stuff plays out pretty weirdly. And it
sounds like a bit of a mess, eh? It doesn't sound like Spain, because normally Spain is quite organized, no? And but I think it's I think it's one of the things that scare people a bit as well about sherry. Sherry is very easy to drink, but it's very complicated in many ways. But basically what you were talking about, Scott, is same area produces the same style of wine, which is Fino and Manzanilla. Same grape variety, same style of aging, just different name, just because it comes from a different town, which is not Jerez, it's Sanlúcar de Barrameda.
So really quickly, here on the coast in Sanlúcar, the wines are saltier, crisper, and tangier because they're bred in really cool, moist ocean breezes. When you go inland to Jerez, where it's a little bit, I'm out too, where it's hotter and drier, the wines are just a nudge more savory, a nudge bigger, but they're basically the same style of thing. You know, it's like the difference between Mornington Pinot and Gippsland Pinot or something
and
like
Geelong,
that. It's just a little journey, but they're fundamentally the same drink.
So, Raul, what do you see in this glass? Well, you know perfectly the producer, you know the wine definitely. Tell me something. What do you see in this wine?
I think the English put it very well. I think when they classify the different styles of sherry, this style of sherry is called pale and dry. It's Pelincala, and is dry in style. So as Scott pointed very well, obviously the sea breezes have a lot to do especially in Sanlúcar. And regarding the style, these wines are Pelincala. They are pale because they're protected from oxidation by yeast that sits over the wines when there is a bit of oxygen on the cask, protect the wines from oxidation, and this yeast called flow, they feed in some nutrients that on the wine and change its structure. So yeah, Sanlúcar for me, wines are a bit more energetic. They have a bit lower alcohol, the fresher, they're more citrusy, they're a bit more floral, and they make you. Obviously, sherry has low acidity, and Palomino is a variety with low acidity. But even though they have low acidity, having that alcohol we discussed before, called glycerol, which these pale wines have very, very little, it makes that these wines have a different refreshing nature. So it makes these wines somehow sharper on your palate. So what you get here is a wine that has a reminiscence of the ocean, but it's floral, it's citrusy, it's an amazing aperitif. And as Scott pointed, when the first time he asked for a glass of manzanilla, they put it a chamomile tea. Those wines produced in San Luca, sometimes they have this floral edge, which is reminiscence of chamomile flower. Obviously, it's an urban legend, but that urban legend says that one of the reasons why the name of manzanilla is manzanilla for a Fino style is because this floral chamomile style. And I needed to add something very cool about San Luca. If someone from the US is listening to us, all the horses, all the wild horses in the United States came from San Luca. All the Mustangs came from San Luca, from Coto de Doñana. So all the horses that the Spaniards took to South America and they became wild and to North America, they're Spanish horses from San Luca. So the real Mustangs are Spanish, American.
It's definitely a place with a lot of traditions, and as Scott mentioned, they have their own native variety of prawns. They love the flamenco and the wines that are coming from there are very distinctive. And I don't want to get into troubles, to be honest, guys, but just a simple question. Manzanilla and Fino, what are they? Are they brothers? Are they cousins? They know each other?
Of course. A Manzanilla and Fino is like if you got two brothers and one look resemble his father and one his mother. One is tall, structure, and the other one is small, gentle, and delicate. They're beautiful on their own kind. You know what I mean? Fino, as Scott pointed, has more structure, is richer, it's got a bit more color, it picks a little tiny bit more oxidation, but it also goes with richer food. But you need to love both styles, but there's a very deeply connection in between both of them.
Yeah.
This becomes really interesting when we're in a restaurant context. So imagine that one of you is running a restaurant that is, that does lots of things, and the other one is running a Spanish restaurant or a degustation restaurant. We would always say to the first restaurant, you need to keep your wines fresh and all of that sort of thing. And you're pouring wine from Burgundy and Italy and, British fizz and all of the things that you're doing. So your Fino or Manzanilla choice is just one wine that you want to turn over freshly every couple of days. And then the dry amber wine that you're selling, if you're having a Amontillado or Oloroso or Palo Cortado. So on the one hand, we say, if you just think about the categories, Fino, which includes Manzanilla, dry ambers, and sweet dark sherries, those three categories, in lots of restaurants, any one of those, you need one of each of them, and it kind of doesn't matter. An Amontillado or a Palo Cortado or Oloroso will go with the terrine or the charcuterie or whatever that you're selling. Finos and Manzanillas do the same job more or less with many, many things. Mm-hmm. In another circumstance, if you're in a Spanish restaurant where you want to go on a journey, excuse me, or if you're in a fancy restaurant that's doing highly, highly geared degustation matches of this little plate with this little drink, you get very, very, very specific. So you can use Fino dry amber, and sweet dark sherries as three basic categories, and you probably should always have one of each of them in your fridge at any given time. But there'll be other times where it's appropriate to look way inside that and go, here's a moment where I want to be super specific about which version of Fino or dry amber or whatever that goes with this particular thing in this particular moment. Especially if you just want to do a sherry journey and we need 6 drinks, so we go, but they have this beautiful in and out, generic and specific, complex way of being used that's really friendly once you get into it.
Definitely. And I think that this is one of the, as I said before, one of the things that scares a bit people, like the many different varieties of a sherry, but not only in Australia or in the world, like also to like Spanish people, also to my friends, when you start talking about the different varieties. But it's one of the things that that's why sommeliers around the world love sherry so much, right? Because the complexity. And thanks, Scott, for that, because one of the questions that I had for you is to touch base on the different styles of sherry that we have. Just because we're gonna talk about one style, one style today. And actually, I guess you guys have watched it, but I wanted to recommend a documentary to the audience, to the people that is watching now. El Misterio del Palo Cortado, or The Mystery of Palo Cortado, is a documentary. You can find it on YouTube, anywhere, where you're gonna get a bit more of a understanding of the different styles of sherry. But we are tasting dry, pale sherry, as the English say. We are moving on. What are we tasting next?
Scott, what are you recommending?
El Muelle, yeah.
El Muelle? Sounds good. Alrighty, let me just pour a bit in my glass. So I'm gonna start, guys, if it's all right for you. I'm gonna switch it around. I want Raul first to describe the wine a little bit. And this is when it gets interesting, because this is a new, as we said, sherry has been making wine for 3,000 years. Styles have changed depending on the demand, of the trends. And back in the days, sherry was one of the most important wine regions. It still is, but in the world, where basically everything was structured as we know Burgundy today. Very much in.
If I can interrupt, because
please.
Talk about sherry making wine for 3,000 years, we gotta say that the first treatise, the first documentation of agriculture ever written, it was written by Romans who were living in Hispania, in Spain. So the first ever books on agriculture written by Columella, ever recorded in any language, they were written here in southern Spain. Okay, and if Burgundy, Germany, they go back to the mid-ages about the classification of the vineyards by Cistercian monks. The classification of the vineyards from Marco de Jerez, some of them, they were classified by the Romans 2,000 years ago. So sherry has 1,000 years more of analytical study of the best soils and the best places where to grow these grapes that Germany or Burgundy or France might have. So,
thanks, Raul. It's one of the reasons I wanted you in this chat. I wanted you to take that pride out. And it's true. It's true. Like if you see the system of categorizing different vineyards in sherry, it's pretty much how it was, how it is in Burgundy right now. And for some reasons, in the 70s, They decided to just concentrate everything, just do a bit of a mass production, have this fortification system, have it a bit more of a leading the industry, and tend to get wines a bit more similar to each other, doing this fortification to send wines to America or to England or to different parts of the world. And now there is this new wave of producers, of winemakers. In front of me, I have one of them that are making wines without fortification, and that are paying a bit more of attention to the single vineyards. And I'm gonna let Scott talk about this, but first, what do we have in this wine, Raul? Tell me everything. How is it on the nose? What's different about this?
Show the bottle.
Oh yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay, so this one is called El Muelle. It's made by Luis Perez, and now Scott is gonna tell us all about it. But I think this is a wine which I've been following for the last few years, and I think the 2019 have an amazing balance. Like, it's a wine which we made with Palomino. Alcohol is high, 14%, but does have to do a bit of the way of how Luis Perez worked on the vineyards, and Scott can tell us about it. But for a 14% wine, it's really, really delicate. Like, it's got a really floral character. So there is a mixture of citrus and tropical fruits. Palomino a bit tropical. So it's a bit pineapple-y. There is a bit of orange blossom. There is some stone fruits. There is a dash of salinity and a mild, Pedro Jimenez as well, and a mild yeasty character. But I think the amazing thing about this one is the texture. It feels like a candy. It's got an amazing texture. It's creamy without being flabby. It's have a bit of persistence on the palate, and it have a bit of a phenolic grip, which I think refresh the wine really, really well.
Yep, I agree.
There is no bitterness. So I think it's an all-rounder. It's delicate, it's got texture, it's slightly voluptuous without being flabby, and it's very clean and very well made. So I think it's a really good example of an still white wine coming from Marco, very well executed with a lot of precision, and with year after year gets better. And I think the 19 is really, really good.
So for me to simplify, if Luis Perez forgive me, this is a wine from Jerez. This is a wine that is non-fortified Fino for people to understand. It's a Fino without fortification. It's called Vino de Pasto, and the non-fortified sherries and the fortified sherries, or just talking about the wine from before and this wine now, Raul, if you have to mention quickly 3 differences about the actual wine between a Fino and this wine, for example, or between the Manzanilla that we tried before and this wine.
Obviously, it's very recent. I mean, look at the Manzanillas, 15% alcohol. This is 14%. But the nature of the texture is different because even though this one is 14%, it has to do of when the grapes were harvested, the natural, the sugar levels that Pedro Jimenez and Palomino can achieve with proper viticultural approach. So when you fortify the wine, somehow that alcohol, it needs to sit on the wine for a period of time to integrate. But this one is a bit more fluid in terms of texture, due that the wine's not been fortified. It's a natural ABV. Then Fino is an ethereal wine with a very strong connection to the ocean. It's nutty, it's iodine, it's salty, it's briny, but has very low acidity. But we had a zesty, citrusy acidity in here, not very high, but much fresher than what we will find in the Manzanilla from before. So we talk about a different textural component due to being fortified or natural ABV. We talk about the freshness that we have in El Muelle. And then we can talk that fruit precision and that sort of floral purity that we do find in Amoye is very different to the one that we'll find in La Goya. It's much more, have a stronger connection to the grapes the one is made with. But maybe Scott can tell us a bit much more about how this specific wine Amoye was made.
Yeah, I wanted to touch base, and I agree with you, Raul, that 19 is looking great, and this is a wine that I have personally been following for a while now, and I think they're doing great. And I follow Luis Perez in his social media, and he's a real nerd about soil types and about viticulture. But Scott knows him personally, and I wanted to ask you, Scott, before talking about the wine, I wanted to ask you who is Luis Perez?
So Luis Perez is the family name of this winery. The guy we're talking about, almost certainly the tallest, prettiest wine nerd on the planet, is a beautiful man called Willie Perez. So Willie runs the family business, which is named after his dad, and his dad's still involved. His dad called Luis, started the bodega in the early 2000s, mainly at that stage wanting to recuperate local reds. And then whites, and only recently have they done anything in the so-called sherry spectrum. But yeah, Willie is, if not the central figure, a very, very important person at the heart of a group of maybe 10 people in El Marco, 10 or a dozen people. Between them might have 7 or 8 wine labels, and a couple of people who work in restaurants and academia and other things, mm-hmm. who have basically formed a revolutionary group called El Manifiesto 119. Not a not very formal thing, but very profound, digging really deep. And Willie and his really close mate Ramiro Ibanez, just the archetypal nerds there. Their basic premises is that since 1970, the censors might not like this bit, but since the 1970s, big capitalism in Jerez basically lost its shit, and for 40 years, Jerez has been hurtling downhill in terms of the wealth of the region, the amount of land under vine, but particularly in terms of confidence and intent. So for 40 years, so I'll pause there for a second. There's 2 big differences between the first 2 wines in this. One is from Sanlúcar, notionally, and one is from much warmer soils inland in Jerez. One is not very connected to the land. It's just fruit that comes in from co-ops who provide what are called sobretables, ready to make young wine that just goes in the Soleras. And most of the people who make Fino and Manzanilla have no connection with the land, with terroir, with the crop quality or anything else. These are wines that come from a very strong view that all you do is fortify them and put them in barrels and you make them in the bodega. So the critical factor is the air in the bodega, how thick we can grow our floor, etc., etc.
Which is something to appreciate, and we need to love it as it is.
Absolutely, it's super important and it's great. But it sets up this false divide between sherry on the one hand and white wine on the other hand. And if we view them through the lens of it's just beautiful Palomino grown in the chalk and salt of El Marco and then expressed in different ways, most of the Finos and Manzanillas are more concerned with adding the flora in the winery and managing the wines in barrel. What Willie and Raul and Ramiro and a bunch of other people are doing is going, what about if we really, really care in the vineyard, we crop it 5 tons instead of 30 tons a hectare, and we grow really great Palomino, what can we do? And that right now gives us an amazing thing that's emerged just in the last 5 years in this region, where in Australian terms, this region's gone from not doing anything more interesting or impactful than making lovely $25 rec retail 375ml stubbies of Fino to making $250 rec retail white wines from Palomino that challenge Coast Jury or whatever you think is, the most precious white Burgundy. And I tell you, if you look at them in a lineup, these are every bit as great. The vineyard-specific, really high-quality viticulture, low crop, not so much making the wine in the winery, but some winery stuff. The Palominos of Willie and Ramiro and a few people are literally amongst the greatest white wines on the planet right now. And 6 years ago, that was unimaginable.
Right. That's right.
So it is literally a revolution. So Manifesto 119 is a coherent but non-formal group of fairly young people in their 30s and 40s who have acknowledged a handful of things. 119 signifies that Andalusia as a province had 119 grape varieties of its own prior to phylloxera in the 1890s. Of those, 43 were native to Marco de Jerez. And nowadays we've got Moscatel, PX and Palomino and Tintilla de Rota, if you're aware of the local grape, and kind of basically nothing else. Willie, Ramiro, and another really nice guy called Primi Colliantes have saved and repropagated another 3 whites. So there's theoretically 7 of the 43 Marco grapes being sort of protected or brought back, but much has been lost. And many styles like natural alcohol Finos instead of fortified Finos. Palomino is a great variety. Vino de Pasto that we're having the first of 2 of right now was a region that just lost its confidence and drive for 50 years, and a bunch of really great young women and men are bringing it all back in a hurry right now.